I was alone at home for a week as my family went on vacation and I stayed behind for work. It was very late and I decided to stay up to watch a blood-chilling movie. In a dimly lit basement, my intention was to truly immerse myself in fear, to test my limits while maintaining an awareness of safety in my own home. At that moment, the calm was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps coming from the first floor. It was a familiar but tiresome occurrence when my family was around. The sound of their footsteps traveling through the front hallway and beyond the basement door. This time, however, a wave of fear swept over me as the sound reached my ears. My immediate reaction was to turn off the television. The basement door was located up the stairs and around the corner, so the intruder would not have noticed any lighting. The basement door handle clicked and turned, enveloping me in pitch blackness. I moved with painstaking slowness, ensuring complete silence, and gradually maneuvered behind the huge television. As I moved forward, I noticed with a growing sense of panic that the black screen was faintly glowing. Footsteps continued down the carpeted but creaky staircase. Frozen in my hidden position, I strained to hear further sounds. Many long minutes passed in silence. Had the intruder noticed the lingering glow of the television screen, or had it faded with time? Did the man stand in absolute darkness? Listening to my movements, it felt like an eternity of silence. Eventually, the initial panic subsided and my thoughts regained clarity. Had I really heard an intruder? Could someone stand in silence for such a long period of time without making any audible signals? The deep silence of the basement began to feel overwhelming, making even the silence itself painful to my ears. Could the unknown presence really have avoided the occasional sounds caused by shuffling or breathing? If there was indeed an intruder, he remained in the basement, for it was very loud on the stairs. The doorknob made a distinctive clicking sound, and there was no way to disguise footsteps on the first floor so that they could not be heard. In the basement, to pass the time, I started counting in my mind, trying not to make a sound, not even to swallow. I reached 60 seconds, then repeated the count 30 times, then 60 times. At that point my fear diminished, replaced by a sense of confusion. I estimated that I had sat in absolute darkness for almost 2 hours without hearing anything else. If there really was an intruder, none of these events made logical sense. I finally decided that I needed to take some action. As sunrise approached, light was inevitably streaming in through the basement windows. In addition, an increasingly unpleasant and unbearable odor hung in the air. Methodically and cautiously, I began to move toward the stairs, using the walls as a guide. The intention was to bypass a potential presence in the darkness and then rush up the stairs. Meanwhile, the noxious odor grew stronger and stronger. Could something have died in the basement overnight? The odor was unlike anything associated with a living person. Disturbing mental images of a grotesque creature or a corpse lurking in the shadows flooded my thoughts, urging me to move as quickly as possible while remaining silent. Just as I neared the foot of the stairs, there was a sudden and loud rumble, reminiscent of the sound of an object falling or collapsing. In that heartbreaking moment, driven by an adrenaline rush, I sprang forward and rushed up the stairs, exiting through the open basement door and out into the wide expanse of my yard. Completely convinced of the presence of an intruder in my home, I quickly dialed the police number on my cell phone and watched the house closely from a safe distance. Law enforcement officers arrived, conducted a thorough search of the premises, and then approached me with solemn expressions. Inside my home, they discovered the body of my elderly neighbor, who had apparently passed away from a heart attack. Their working theory was that I may have accidentally left the front door unlocked and the neighbor had entered my home in his dying moment, seeking help. At first, I struggled with guilt, imagining that I had stood idly by in the dark while the elderly man emitted his last breath. However, a new realization dawned on me: what could have been the cause of the loud rumble that had me running up the stairs? When I contacted the police, their confirmation sent shivers down my spine. The back door of my house had been left ajar and a lone footprint was left on the dirt beside it. For reasons I could never understand, there was another person in that basement with us, a creature that remained silent, patient, and vigilant in the darkness next to the lifeless body of an elderly man. In the dimly lit room, Jane glanced at the clock. Red numbers were flashing. The sun has long since disappeared below the horizon. The moon cast eerie shadows on the walls, and an unsettling silence enveloped the night. She was 20 years old, and a mixture of youthful curiosity and apprehension flowed through her veins. Jane had no idea that this night would be a turning point in her life, a story of danger, resilience, and transformation. Lying in bed, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. A movement caught her attention, and she glanced toward the window. There, among the shadows, Jane saw a figure walking around her house. A disturbing silhouette against the moonlit night. Jane's heart pounded as she watched the obscure figure approach the windows. Its intentions unclear but undoubtedly nefarious. Jane realized that the kitchen window was open, but it had a screen over it. It was the only potential point of entry for an intruder. Strangely enough, a sense of grim relief swept over the girl, as she realized that the window was about 15 feet off the ground and seemed out of reach. If anyone had tried to get in, it was the only window that offered some semblance of security. A pungent odor interrupted Jane's thoughts, cutting through the tension like a knife. Gasoline, its acrid odor wafted by the wind, filled the air. Panic squeezed the girl's chest as it dawned on her. This was no ordinary intrusion, this was a plot to set the house on fire. With trembling hands, she reached for the phone and dialed 911. There was a mixture of urgency and fear in her voice, as she explained the situation and the imminent danger that loomed over her. Miraculously, the police arrived quickly, their presence a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. The sound of sirens pierced the night as police cars pulled up outside Jane's house. Officers crowded the area, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they apprehended the intruder. And then, to the girl's shock, the truth was revealed. It was her ex-husband, the man whose anger and resentment had driven him to this dangerous act. He was caught red-handed dousing Jane's house with gasoline. The police, wasting no time, detained him, and his protests went unheeded. As the cold metal of the handcuffs squeezed his wrists, the girl was overcome with a mixture of relief and fear. The man she once loved had become unrecognizable, an outsider consumed by his own demons. The court system had taken its course, and her ex-husband was sent to prison on a charge of attempted arson, among other crimes. In a quiet suburban neighborhood stood a modest house with a white palisade. It was in this house that young Alex spent his childhood days, surrounded by the simple comforts of home. One weekend, an unexpected turn of events set the stage for a series of stunning encounters that would forever be etched in his memory. Alex was only 10 years old, his imagination fueled by the pages of adventure books and the limitless possibilities. Video games. His mother had planned a trip to France that weekend, promising an exciting adventure across the border. But fate had other plans, and Alex's forgotten passport turned his dream vacation into an unplanned stay at home. As the weekend sun lit up the neighborhood with golden rays, Alex found solace in the glow of his tablet screen. He was absorbed in the game, navigating digital landscapes and overcoming virtual challenges. The day seemed peaceful until the distant rumble of an approaching car reached his ears. Curiosity gripped him. He looked out the window and saw a sight that sent shivers down his spine. Parked on a quiet street was a car he didn't recognize. A sleek black car that seemed out of place among the usual assortment of sedans and minivans. His heart sped up when he noticed two figures emerging from the car. The ominous presence of men dressed in all black clothing, including caps and masks covering their faces, made Alex uneasy. Instinct took over, fear gripping him like a vice. He rushed away from the window, his heart pounding like a drum. Hiding behind the couch in the living room, he looked out wide-eyed as two mysterious men approached the front of his house. The sound of their boots on the path and the eerie silence that hung in the air heightened his anxiety. Time seemed to slow down as the men reached the house. A sharp knock on the window broke the silence, echoing in Alex's ears. His heart pounded frantically, each knock a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond his field of vision. The pounding moved to the front door, the wood creaking under their insistence. Alex's breath caught as he watched, frozen in place. Minutes passed, and Alex's instincts took over again. He fumbled for his tablet and began videotaping the scene unfolding outside. He managed to capture the license plate of the car, its numbers becoming part of a puzzle that he hoped would someday provide answers. His trembling hands held the device as he went from fear to a newfound determination to document every detail he could. Just as suddenly as they had appeared, The two men left the house. Their steps were purposeful, but disturbingly calm. Alex followed their every move, taking notes as they got back into the black car and drove away, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of foreboding. Having plucked up the courage to tell of their heartbreaking encounter, Alex turned to his mother with his evidence. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she dismissed his concern, writing it off as an overactive imagination. Despite his seriousness, she failed to recognize the gravity of the situation, leaving Alex feeling isolated with fear and insecurity. In the days that followed, Alex struggled with the growing sense of anxiety. Memories of those men in black haunted his thoughts. In the town of Willowbrook lived a young woman named Emily. She was known for her adventurous spirit, her love of running, and her cozy little house tucked away on a quiet street. Emily lived alone, finding solace in her independence and the comfort of her solitude. One sunny morning, Emily decided to go for her usual morning jog. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, she laced up her sneakers and set off on a path she had walked countless times before. The rhythmic tapping of her sneakers on the sidewalk and the slight breeze on her skin filled her with a sense of calm. On the run, Emily felt a sudden craving for a refreshing fruit juice. With phone in hand, she placed an order on Postmate, hoping the juice would arrive before she got home. However, fate had other plans. When she finally arrived home after an invigorating run, she realized that her juice order had not yet been delivered. Frustrated but not discouraged, she decided to make the best of the situation and took the opportunity to take a relaxing shower. Steam enveloped the bathroom as Emily stood under the warm cascade of water, letting her muscles relax. The sound of water droplets on the tiles created a soothing melody, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. But then, in the midst of her peaceful reverie, there was a sudden knock on the bathroom door. With a shudder, Emily's heart hammered harder. Who could be knocking on her bathroom door? She wrapped herself in a towel, thoughts and fears rushing through her mind. The knocking continued, insistent and disturbing. Panic gripped her as she realized the vulnerability of her position alone, wet, and with no means of protection. With trembling hands, Emily grabbed her clothes and tiptoed toward the bathroom door. Her voice shook as she called out, "Who's there?" No answer, only the ominous silence of the house. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly turned the doorknob, her fingers slippery with apprehension. When the door creaked open, her eyes widened with shock and disbelief. A stranger stood in the hallway with a bag in his hands. The bag, the juice she had ordered. Her mind struggled to comprehend what was going on. How had he gotten into her house? Why was he standing there, right outside her bathroom? What are you doing here? How did you get in here? Emily's voice shook as she demanded answers. The man didn't seem confused. He was almost amused by her reaction. He explained that he had found the front door unlocked and had taken the liberty of placing her order inside. The mixture of fear and anger in Emily intensified. Her sense of security had been shattered, and the audacity of a stranger invading her personal space sent shivers down her spine. Eventually, Emily mustered up the courage to firmly ask the man to leave. He complied, shrugged implacably, turned and walked away. Left alone again, Emily locked the front door and sat down, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the encounter. In the town of Millbrook, located on the outskirts of town, stood a charming and somewhat isolated house. It was the childhood home of Sarah Thompson, a smart 18-year-old who had just finished her first year of college. The house was surrounded by vast fields, which added a touch of tranquility to the hectic city life. There was a neighborhood next to the house, but since only one family member lived nearby, Sarah's dwelling had an air of seclusion. The warm summer sun shone through Sarah's window as she lay in bed, enjoying the luxury of sleep. The transition from the demands of college to the comforts of home was truly delightful. After a leisurely morning, she decided it was time for a refreshing shower. As she gathered her towel and toiletries, a sudden and unexpected sound echoed through the house, a male voice full of excitement and energy. Startled, Sarah froze for a moment, her heart pounding. She knew she was alone at home, as her parents were away that day. Could her father have returned unnoticed by her? Pushing the uncertainty aside, She wrapped herself in a towel and went downstairs. "Daddy," she called out, concern audible in her voice. There was no response. She searched the first floor, looking in the living room, kitchen, and study, but her father was nowhere to be found. Confused and slightly nervous, she shook off her unease, writing it off as her imagination playing tricks on her. As the days passed, the incident gradually faded from her memory. It wasn't until her mother discovered the broken basement window that the true gravity of the situation became apparent. Fear gripped Sarah as she looked at the broken glass. It was clear that someone was trying to get inside. The shattered glass told of a desperate intrusion, but Sarah was taken aback by the realization that she had heard nothing. Two men must have been responsible, she remembered hearing one excitedly call out to the other. But why hadn't she heard the window break? The thought gnawed at her mind, and a sense of vulnerability took root. Sarah and her family assumed that these would-be intruders must have abandoned their mission upon hearing her voice. The house wasn't empty, and that realization was both comforting and a haunting revelation. What if they hadn't heard her? What if she had been in the shower, oblivious to their presence? Nights became restless for Sarah. The tranquility of her home was replaced by an anxious tension. Fear of what might happen if she didn't hear the voices of these men kept her awake until the early hours of the morning. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside increased her anxiety.